Hey guys, tonight we are quietly stepping into a medieval countryside where the air smells like damp earth, wood smoke, and something faintly sweet you can't quite place yet. You're standing on uneven ground, because medieval paths were apparently designed by people who hated ankles. And the sun is lowering itself, without drama, behind a line of trees. Somewhere nearby, bees are humming with the kind of calm confidence that comes from having a very clear job description. You are not dressed correctly for this, by the way. Your modern expectations of comfort would last about 6 minutes out here. You probably wouldn't survive this, not because it's dangerous, but because you'd complain about the lack of chairs. Still, for tonight, you're just visiting, and the bees don't seem to mind. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. While you're settling in, go ahead and comment where you're listening from and what time it is there. Somewhere in the world, it's always beekeeper or clock. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You're standing at the edge of an apiary, though no one here would call it that. To them, this is simply where the bees live. A small clearing opens up between trees, and scattered around it are several straw hives, dome-shaped and textured like oversized loaves of bread. This is a widely accepted historical fact. Medieval beekeepers commonly used straw skeps, lightweight and practical, though admittedly terrible by modern bee welfare standards. But for now, the bees seem content enough, drifting in lazy loops before returning home. The beekeeper hasn't noticed you yet, or maybe they have and are politely pretending not to, which would be very on brand for this era. They move slowly, deliberately, as if rushing might offend someone important, which, in this case, would be the bees. You get the sense that everything here happens at half speed. Not out of laziness, but out of respect. The air hums gently. Not loudly, not urgently. Just enough to remind you that this place is alive. Bees in medieval Europe weren't feared the way you might expect. They were valued, observed, and quietly admired. Honey mattered. Wax mattered. Bees mattered. A lot. You crouch slightly, because the ground invites it, and because standing upright feels a little too assertive for this moment. The beekeeper lifts a small bundle of smoldering material, mostly dried herbs and bits of fungus. Smoke curls upward in thin, apologetic strands. Here's a lesser-known detail. Medieval beekeepers believed smoke didn't just calm bees physically, but socially. It was thought to confuse them just enough to prevent offense. Basically, even the smoke is being polite. The hives sit peacefully, no buzzing clouds of panic, no angry swarms, just steady movement, in and out, like breathing. You realize how much quieter this is than you expected. Bees, it turns out, don't spend all their time being dramatic. There's a reason beekeeping fits so comfortably into medieval life. Honey is one of the few reliable sweeteners available in Europe at this time. Sugar exists, technically, but it's rare and expensive, and no one here is sprinkling it on things casually. Honey is everywhere, in food, in medicine, in drink, and especially in candles. Beeswax candles burn cleaner and longer than tallow, and churches in particular prefer them. This is another widely accepted historical fact. Beeswax candles were essential to religious life, which made bees indirectly sacred in a very practical way. The beekeeper hums quietly, not to entertain themselves, but to signal presence. Sudden silence can startle bees. Apparently, you make a mental note to hum more in your daily life, though it probably won't have the same effect on co-workers. You notice markings scratched into a nearby post. Simple symbols. Ownership signs. Bees, surprisingly, fall under medieval property law. Hives belong to someone. Swarms, however, are more complicated. Historians still wonder how often disputes arose when a swarm relocated itself. Was it still owned, or did it become fair game? The laws try to be clear, but bees have never been great at respecting boundaries. A light joke drifts through your mind. Medieval lawyers arguing passionately while bees ignore all of them. The image is comforting. The beekeeper finally acknowledges you with a nod that suggests you've been there all along. They gesture toward the hives, inviting you closer, but not too close. Respect has a radius. You step carefully, aware that sudden movements here would be considered deeply rude. The bees continue their work, gathering nectar, navigating by sun and memory, building something collectively without meetings or minutes. You find this deeply soothing and a little humiliating. There's a quiet order to this place. No shouting, no rushing. Even the rules surrounding bees tend to be gentle. In many regions, damaging hives carried fines rather than physical punishment. This wasn't mercy, it was practicality. Bees are valuable. You don't destroy value if you can help it. You feel the tension leave your shoulders as the light softens further. Evening is approaching, and with it, a natural slowdown. The beekeeper begins to step back, giving the bees space to settle. You follow their lead, because this entire night seems to be about learning when not to interfere. The hum lowers slightly, like a long exhale. The smell of honey becomes more noticeable now that the air has cooled. It's subtle, warm, grounding. You're not meant to take anything from here. Just observe. Just be present. And as the first stars start appearing above the trees, you realize this journey isn't about bees alone. It's about a way of living that trusts patience, values quiet work, and understands that some systems function best when left mostly alone. You stay a moment longer, listening, before the path ahead gently suggests itself. You don't move far, because there's no reason to. The beekeeper shifts their weight, and somehow that feels like permission for the evening to continue. You stand beside them now, close enough to notice the details: hands stained faintly with wax, sleeves patched more for familiarity than fashion, boots that have known this ground for years and see no reason to argue with it. This is the medieval beekeeper, and they are exactly as exciting as you hoped they wouldn't be. They move slowly, not out of age necessarily, but habit. Bees don't reward urgency. They reward consistency. This is a widely accepted historical fact. Medieval beekeeping required regular, predictable routines: checking hives, repairing straw, managing swarms, often done alone or with one quiet helper. Drama had no role here. Drama scares bees. The beekeeper glances at the hives, then back to you, and offers a short explanation without flourish. Honey flow is good this year. The flowers cooperated. The weather behaved itself. You nod, because this sounds like success, spoken in its natural language. There's a calm competence about them that feels earned rather than announced. You get the sense this person knows exactly how much movement a hive tolerates, how close a footstep can land, how long smoke should linger before it becomes insulting. You imagine them learning this not from books, but from small, painful mistakes made long ago. Here's a lesser-known detail that quietly surprises you. Medieval beekeepers often learned through observation rather than formal instruction, passing down techniques within families or villages. There were no manuals, just bees, seasons, and repetition. Trial, error, and the occasional sting. The beekeeper lets out a low hum, again not a song, more like a presence marker. You try it too, softly, just to see. It doesn't scare the bees. It doesn't impress them either. You feel judged, but gently. They point to one hive in particular, slightly darker than the others. Older, more productive. There's pride there, but restrained. Medieval pride tends to whisper rather than shout. That hive will provide honey later in the year, once enough has been left for the bees themselves. This balance matters. Take too much, and the hive suffers. Take too little, and you've wasted everyone's time. Beekeepers knew this. It wasn't charity. It was sustainability before the word existed. Historians still wonder how much medieval environmental awareness came from philosophy versus simple necessity. When your livelihood depends on something staying alive, you tend to learn restraint quickly. The beekeeper reaches for a small wooden tool, nothing fancy. They don't use it yet, they just hold it, thinking. You notice how often they pause before doing anything. Modern, you would already be halfway through a mistake by now. A light joke forms in your mind. If productivity apps were medieval, they'd just say, move slower. You decide the beekeeper would approve. They explain, casually, that bees are legally protected here. Not in the way castles are protected, but enough that harming hives without cause can bring fines. This is another accepted historical fact. Many medieval law codes included provisions regarding bees, swarms, and honey production. Peaceful laws. Mostly, bees contribute, so you let them. The beekeeper chuckles quietly at something, perhaps a memory of a neighbor who tried to rush a harvest and paid for it. Financially and emotionally, bees remember slights, or so people believed. You're not sure that's biologically accurate, but you understand the sentiment. You watch as the beekeeper adjusts a piece of straw, barely touching the hive, like tucking in a blanket without waking the sleeper. The bees barely react. Respect acknowledged. There's a moment where nothing happens at all, and it's perfect. The light continues to fade. The hum continues to soften. The beekeeper steps back, signaling the end of the workday. You realize how natural this feels. No clock, no alarm, just a shared understanding that evening has arrived. As you turn slightly, following them toward the edge of the clearing, you feel a quiet appreciation settle in. This job isn't glamorous. It isn't loud, but it's steady. And tonight, steadiness feels like exactly what you needed. The path leads onward, honey-scented and unhurried. The path doesn't change much as you walk, and neither does the pace. That seems intentional. The beekeeper leads you toward a low wooden bench near the edge of the clearing. The kind of seat that exists only because someone once got tired and decided to stop standing. You sit. The ground cools through your clothes, grounding you in a way modern furniture rarely manages. This is the part where honey stops being an abstract idea and starts being the quiet center of everything. The beekeeper gestures toward a small clay jar resting nearby, sealed with wax. They don't open it yet. They just let it sit there, heavy with implication. This is a widely accepted historical fact. In medieval Europe, honey was the primary sweetener available to most people, long before sugar became common or affordable. If something tasted pleasant, chances were bees were involved. Honey is food. First of all, you imagine it drizzled over coarse bread, stirred into porridge, mixed with nuts, apples, or whatever else happened to be around. No recipes written down, just habits repeated until they worked. Sweetness here isn't indulgent. It's practical. Calories matter. Preservation matters. Flavor is a bonus. The beekeeper finally opens the jar. Slowly, as if the sound itself deserves respect. The scent reaches you, immediately warm, floral, slightly earthy. Not the sharp sweetness you're used to, but something deeper. Less sugar rush, more meadow memory. Here's a lesser-known detail. Medieval honey varied wildly depending on local plants, sometimes so much that people could identify where it came from just by taste. No labels, no branding, just very opinionated villagers. You suspect debates over better honey could last entire evenings. Honey is medicine too. The beekeeper explains this without enthusiasm, because it's obvious to them. Honey is used on wounds, mixed into cough remedies, combined with herbs for stomach troubles. Modern science agrees with parts of this honey does have antibacterial properties, but medieval people didn't need lab results. They needed things to stop hurting. Honey helped. You imagine someone centuries ago holding a spoonful of honey the way you might hold a mug of tea when you're sick. Carefully, hopefully. The thought is comforting. Then there's light. Beeswax candles burn cleaner and brighter than tallow, with less smoke and smell. This is another accepted historical fact. Beeswax candles were preferred in churches and by wealthier households, not just for quality, but symbolism. Clean light mattered. You picture long evenings softened by that steady glow, shadows behaving themselves for once. The beekeeper chuckles quietly, mentioning that wax is sometimes more valuable than honey. You blink at that. Wax doesn't spoil. Wax stores, wax keeps its shape. Honey disappears quickly once people know it's there. Historians still wonder whether medieval beekeepers thought of bees as livestock or collaborators. The language used is strangely respectful. You don't milk bees. You don't force them. You negotiate gently. The beekeeper's behavior suggests partnership more than ownership. They dip a finger lightly into the jar and taste, then offer you the same. You do it without thinking, which would absolutely get you in trouble in most medieval scenarios. But tonight, the rules are forgiving. The honey coats your tongue slowly. It doesn't rush. It stays. A small joke slips into your thoughts. Medieval deserts were just honey pretending to be something else. You smile faintly. The beekeeper explains that honey also functions as payment. Rent can be paid in honey. Taxes too. Sometimes it's measurable, divisible, universally useful. This idea will follow you later, but for now it just settles in your mind like a soft fact placed on a shelf. The bees hum on, indifferent to how important they are. You respect that about them. As the jar is sealed again and set aside, the light grows dimmer, the conversation softer. Honey has done its work. Not energizing you, but grounding you. Sweetness without urgency. You feel yourself slowing to match the rhythm around you. The path forward feels clear, unforced. Like everything else here, it will wait until you're ready. You don't realize you've been watching the smoke until it curls a little closer. Lazy and pale against the darkening trees, the beekeeper lifts the smoldering bundle again. Not in a hurry. Just enough to remind the hives that evening is approaching and everyone should be polite about it. The smoke smells faintly herbal, not sharp, more like a memory of a forest than anything meant to alarm. This is where you learn about the homes themselves. The hives are straw skeps, woven tightly and shaped into rounded domes. They sit directly on the ground, sometimes on flat stones, sometimes on wooden boards, depending on how worried the beekeeper is about dampness. This is a widely accepted historical fact. Before movable frame hives, medieval beekeepers used skeps almost exclusively, even though harvesting honey usually meant destroying part or all of the hive. Efficiency, as we define it, had not yet entered the conversation. You walk slowly round one, careful not to cast a shadow too suddenly. The texture of the straw is rough and uneven, patched in places where repairs were made rather than replacements. Nothing here is new, everything is maintained. You get the sense that replacing something entirely would feel wasteful, maybe even rude. The beekeeper explains, quietly, that straw breathes. It keeps the hive warm in winter, cool in summer. Bees seem to prefer it. Whether that's true or just something beekeepers say to justify tradition is still debated. Historians still wonder how much of medieval beekeeping practice came from observation versus inherited belief. The bees, as usual, refuse to clarify. The smoke plays its role now. It doesn't drive the bees away. It convinces them to stay busy. This is another accepted historical understanding. Smoke interferes with alarm pheromones, reducing defensive behavior. Medieval beekeepers didn't know the chemistry, but they knew the effect. Less panic, fewer stings, better evenings. Here's a lesser-known detail that feels oddly charming. Some beekeepers preferred specific plants for smoke, believing bees reacted more kindly to familiar scents. Dried lavender, sage, or fungus gathered from old trees might be used. You imagine the bees recognizing the smell, thinking, "Ah, this again. Fine." The beekeeper moves with exaggerated gentleness, like someone navigating a sleeping household at night. Every step is measured. Every gesture has a pause before it. You try to mirror this, and immediately understand how difficult it is to slow down on purpose. Your body wants to hurry. The bees do not. There's a moment where the beekeeper stops entirely, waiting for the hum to settle into something lower. You stand there too, doing absolutely nothing. It feels strangely productive. They explain that harvesting honey will happen later, not now. Late summer, early autumn. Tonight is about maintenance. Checking, adjusting. Letting the bees know they're not alone, but also not bothered. This balance seems to define medieval beekeeping as much as any tool. A small joke drifts through your mind. Modern productivity culture would absolutely hate this job. You smile and keep that thought to yourself. You notice a few bees land briefly on the straw, then lift off again. No aggression, no drama. The beekeeper hasn't been stung in a long time. They mention casually, which feels like bragging, disguised as calm fact. You consider your own odds and decide not to test them. The smoke thins and drifts away, leaving the air clearer, cooler. The hives seem to settle, the hum evening out like a breath finally released. This is the signal. Work is done. Interference is complete. As the beekeeper lowers the smoking bundle, they give the hives one last look, not anxious, just attentive. The bees continue as they were, unconcerned by your presence, already focused on whatever bees focus on at night. You step back together, creating space. The clearing feels different now, quieter, more settled. The light has faded further, and the first real chill of evening arrives, subtle but noticeable. You realize that these hives, simple as they look, hold an entire system architecture, biology, law, economy woven together with straw and patience. And none of it rushes. As you move on, the scent of smoke clings lightly to your clothes. A reminder that sometimes the gentlest interventions leave the longest impressions. The path away from the hives is barely a path at all. More a suggestion agreed upon by boots over time. You follow it slowly, the straw domes slipping out of view behind you. Though the hum seems to linger, as if it's memorized the shape of your ears. The evening air cools further, carrying the faint sweetness of honey mixed with soil and wood smoke. If calm had a temperature, this would be it. You're walking now toward the part of beekeeping that rarely involves bees directly. The counting. The beekeeper stops near a rough wooden shed, more linter than building, its door hanging slightly crooked. Inside, shelves hold clay pots, small barrels, and wax-stained tools that look like they've been handled by the same family for generations. This is where honey becomes something measurable, taxable, and, unfortunately for everyone involved, discussable with officials. A widely accepted historical fact slides into place here. In medieval Europe, honey was one of the primary sweeteners available. making it economically valuable long before sugar became common. Honey wasn't just a treat. It was currency adjacent. You could pay rents, tithes, or fines with it. Bees, unknowingly, were part of the financial system. The beekeeper lifts a lid from one pot so you can see inside. Thick, amber honey clings stubbornly, moving at a speed that feels almost intentional. You resist the urge to touch it, partly out of politeness, partly because you're pretty sure that would be considered a crime in at least 3 jurisdictions. This is where honey taxes enter your life. Depending on the region and century, beekeepers owed a portion of their harvest to a lord, a monastery, or the church. Sometimes it was measured by volume, sometimes by weight, and sometimes by estimation, which is medieval code for good luck. Records show honey listed alongside grain and livestock in tax documents. Bees didn't get a line item, but their work absolutely did. Here's a lesser-known detail that feels quietly absurd. In some areas, beekeepers were required to swear an oath that they hadn't hidden extra honey before tax collection. An oath about honey. You imagine standing solemnly, hand raised, promising that your bees were fully transparent in their operations. Somewhere, a bee accountant nods seriously. The beekeeper chuckles when you mention this, admitting that creative measuring probably happened anyway. Clay pots weren't standardized, barrels warped, honey stuck to everything. Exactness was aspirational at best. Historians still wonder just how much honey quietly avoided taxation through accidental spillage or generous interpretations of volume. You step deeper into the shed, noticing beeswax candles stacked carefully in the corner. These, too, mattered. Beeswax burned cleaner than tallow and didn't smell like regret. Churches prized it. Monasteries demanded it. Another accepted historical fact: beeswax candles were often reserved for religious use, their purity symbolically important. The light itself carried meaning. The beekeeper runs a thumb along a candle's edge, inspecting it the way someone inspects bread. This isn't sentimentality. It's quality control. Bad wax means bad candles, and bad candles mean complaints, which medieval people were surprisingly good at. A joke drifts through your mind again. Medieval Yelp reviews would have been brutal. 1 star, candle smoked. Spiritually disappointed. Outside, the sky deepens toward blue-black. The shed feels warmer now, by contrast, smelling faintly of wax and wood. You realize how interconnected everything is. Bees to honey, honey to taxes, taxes to power. Even here, in a quiet clearing, the hive echoes into courts and cloisters. The beekeeper mentions disputes to neighboring villages arguing over wild hives. Forests claimed not just for timber, but for bees. Which brings up an open question historians still debate. When a swarm left a hive and settled elsewhere, who owned it? The original keeper? The landowner? The bees themselves? Medieval law tried to answer this with varying success. You imagine chasing a swarm while shouting legal precedents, which feels both accurate and deeply exhausting. The shed door closes softly behind you as you step back out. The night has settled in fully now, calm and unbothered. Somewhere behind you, bees continue working without any awareness of taxes, oaths, or debates. You envy them a little. As you walk on, the idea settles gently. Honey isn't just sweetness. It's labor, law, and quiet negotiation, all flowing slowly, refusing to be rushed, much like the night itself. You continue walking with that slow, unhurried pace that seems to settle into your legs without asking permission. The ground is softer here, slightly damp, and your steps make a quiet, forgiving sound. Like the earth understands you're not in a hurry. The beekeeper leads you toward a low table set beneath an old oak. its surface marked by rings, scratches, and one mysterious burn mark no one remembers creating. This, you're told, is where honey becomes official. The table holds a small scale, its metal arms uneven, its weights mismatched and smoothed by time. Nothing about it suggests precision, yet everyone involved pretends it does. A widely accepted historical fact settles in gently here. Medieval taxation was often paid in goods rather than money, and honey was a common form of payment in rural economies. Coins were scarce. Bees were reliable, mostly. The beekeeper places a clay pot onto the scale, then adds weights, one by one, squinting in a way that implies both deep focus and complete guesswork. You realize the honey tax isn't just about collecting sweetness. It's about performance. Everyone knows the measurement isn't perfect, but everyone agrees to act as if it is. Medieval life runs on this quiet agreement. A local official arrives, not with fanfare, but with the subdued presence of someone who's done this too many times to care deeply anymore. His clothes are neat but worn, his expression neutral in that practiced way that says, "I am here to observe, not to enjoy." You imagine his internal monologue is mostly about supper. Honey is poured slowly, thick and patient, into another vessel. It moves like it has all night. The official watches, nodding occasionally, as if the honey might speed up if encouraged. It does not. Here's a quirky detail that rarely makes it into textbooks. In some regions, honey taxes were assessed seasonally, meaning the timing of blooms directly affected what people owed. A bad spring didn't just mean fewer flowers. It meant negotiations, appeals, and the occasional dramatic sigh in front of tax collectors. Weather, as always, had opinions. The beekeeper mutters something about last year's rain, and the official responds with a sympathetic grunt. This is medieval small talk. No one raises their voice, no one gestures wildly. It's all very calm, which feels surprising given that this is, technically, about taking someone's honey. You lean against the oak, listening to bees drift lazily between flowers nearby. They don't seem concerned. Another open question floats through your mind. One historians still wonder about. Did medieval people truly understand how dependent these taxes were on ecological balance? Or did they simply accept fluctuations as divine mood swings? The line between environmental awareness and religious interpretation was flexible. A second pot is weighed, then a third. The official makes a mark on a small wax tablet, the stylus scratching softly. This is record-keeping at its most fragile. One warm day, one accidental elbow, and the numbers could melt into nothing. You briefly consider how many economic systems have relied on materials that absolutely should not be left in the sun. There's a pause while the beekeeper wipes his hands on a cloth already beyond saving. He offers the official a small taste. This isn't bribery exactly, it's tradition. Honey tasted now confirms honey paid later. The official accepts, dipping a finger carefully, like he's aware this moment could define his entire day. He nods, approval granted. Civilization continues. You catch yourself smiling. It's oddly peaceful, no shouting, no guards, no dramatic declarations. Just honey, wood, and mutual exhaustion. One light joke drifts through your thoughts. If all taxes were paid in honey, revolutions might have taken longer. Sticky fingers slow things down. As the official leaves, the beekeeper carefully seals the remaining pots. What's left will be used, traded, or saved. Honey lasts, if stored well. That patience feels symbolic now. Medieval life rewards those who can wait. The night deepens further, stars faint but present. The oak creaks softly above you. Somewhere in the distance, a bell marks the hour, though no one seems to respond to it. Time here feels more like a suggestion than a rule. You move on again, the image of that slow-pouring honey staying with you. Taxes, you realize, don't always arrive loudly. Sometimes they arrive gently, measured in amber drips under a tree, while bees hum like they're laughing at everyone involved. You leave the oak behind and follow a narrow path that bends toward stone walls half hidden by ivy. The air changes here, cooler, quieter, with a faint echo that makes even your breathing sound thoughtful. Somewhere ahead, bells have finished their gentle argument with the night, and the silence that follows feels deliberate, like it's part of the architecture. This is monastery land. You don't need a sign to know it. The ground is carefully kept, the plants arranged with intention rather than enthusiasm. Gardens stretch neatly along the walls, herbs growing in orderly rows, each leaf doing its best to look useful. And tucked just beyond the vegetables, almost modestly, sit the hives. Fewer than before, but better maintained. These bees live a contemplative life. A widely accepted historical fact settles in here. Monasteries across medieval Europe were major centers of beekeeping, especially because beeswax candles were essential for religious rituals. Prayer required light. Light required wax. Wax required bees. It's a surprisingly practical chain for something so spiritual. A monk approaches, robes whispering softly against the ground. He nods to you without surprise, as if visitors wandering in from the dark are entirely normal. His hands are stained faintly with wax, his fingers moving slowly, deliberately, like he's always halfway through a thought. You realize the pace here isn't just cultural, it's enforced by routine. The monk gestures toward the hives and begins checking them with a calm that borders on meditative. There's no rush, no sudden movements. Smoke drifts gently from a small burner, not enough to alarm the bees, just enough to suggest cooperation. Even the insects seem quieter here, as if they've agreed to respect the silence. Here's a lesser-known detail that feels oddly comforting. Some monasteries kept written records of their hives, noting not just yields, but behavior, whether bees were calm, productive, or temperamental. You imagine a medieval spreadsheet labeled Bee Mood, which feels both unnecessary and deeply human. The monk hums softly while he works. Not a tune you recognize, but something repetitive and low, blending with the hive's hum until it's hard to tell which sound belongs to whom. You stand nearby, hands folded, suddenly aware that you've adopted the posture without being asked. Inside the monastery, candles flicker behind narrow windows. Their light is steady, not flashy. Beeswax burns cleanly, without much smoke, another reason it's favored here. Tallow candles smell. Beeswax behaves. The monks appreciate good behavior in all forms. You follow the monk into a small side room where finished candles rest on wooden racks. They vary slightly in shape, none perfectly straight, all functional. The room smells faintly sweet and warm, like quiet effort. The monk explains, gently, that candle making is shared labor. Everyone helps, even the bees, in their own way. An open question drifts into your thoughts. One historians still wonder about: did monks view bees as purely resources, or as collaborators in a divine process? Writings sometimes suggest admiration, even affection. Other times, bees are simply inventoried. The truth probably sits somewhere between reverence and accounting. You notice a small carving near the Dora be etched into the stone. It's subtle, easy to miss. The monk smiles when you point it out. Bees, he says, are symbols of order, obedience, and quiet productivity. You consider how ironic that is, given how often they ignore human plans entirely. A light joke floats through your mind. If monks had motivational posters, bees would absolutely be on them. Work quietly, make sweetness. Don't ask questions. As night deepens, the monastery grows even stiller. The bees retreat fully into their hives, their work done for now. Candles are lit inside for evening prayers, their steady glow casting soft shadows that move slowly, like they're also tired. You step back outside, the hum fading behind stone walls. The path ahead waits, unlit but familiar. You carry with you the image of bees and monks sharing a rhythm, both working without hurry, both trusting that small, steady actions add up to something lasting. The night welcomes you forward, unbothered, patient, and very quiet. The monastery fades behind you, stone dissolving back into shadow, and the path narrows again until it feels more like a suggestion than a direction. Your steps slow naturally, not from tiredness, but from the strange politeness of the night. Crickets begin their low, uneven orchestra, and somewhere nearby, water moves lazily over rocks, unconcerned with timekeeping. You're heading toward a custom that sounds whimsical until you realize how seriously it was taken. The beekeeper reappears, as if summoned by memory alone, and gestures for you to follow toward a small cluster of hives set apart from the rest. These are older, their straw darkened with age, their bases reinforced with stones placed carefully, almost lovingly. You sense immediately that this place carries stories, not just honey. This is where people talk to the bees. A widely accepted historical fact settles gently into place. In many parts of medieval Europe, it was customary to tell the bees about important household events, especially deaths. Bees were informed when their keeper died, when a marriage occurred, or when a family moved. Failing to do so was believed to risk the bees abandoning the hive or ceasing to produce honey. The beekeeper removes his cap, not dramatically, but respectfully. He leans close to the nearest hive and speaks softly, as though addressing an elderly relative who appreciates being kept in the loop. His voice is calm, factual, almost soothing. You can't hear every word, but the tone suggests updates, not announcements. You find yourself leaning in, too, curious and slightly amused. One light joke drifts through your thoughts. This is the original group chat, and the bees are always online. Here's a lesser-known detail that feels especially tender. Sometimes a strip of black cloth was tied to the hive after a death, signaling mourning. In some regions, honey was offered ceremonially, as if sharing grief through sweetness. The bees, of course, responded by doing exactly what they always did. But that didn't stop people from believing they understood. You stand quietly while the beekeeper finishes. The bees hum steadily, unchanged, unimpressed by human drama. Still, the ritual matters. It creates a moment where grief, continuity, and daily labor intersect without rushing each other. Historians still wonder if people truly believed bees comprehended these messages, or if the ritual served the humans more, providing comfort, routine, and a sense of control during moments when life felt fragile. The answer probably depends on who you ask, and how tired they were at the time. The beekeeper straightens and exhales, like he's just finished a necessary task. He explains that bees don't like surprises. Whether that's true or not feels beside the point. Humans certainly don't. Talking to the bees makes transitions feel acknowledged, witnessed by something steady and ancient. You notice how quiet everything is now. Even the crickets seem to pause. The hive's hum becomes more noticeable, not louder, just more present. It's a sound without urgency, without emotion, without opinion. There's something comforting about that. Another gentle joke floats in. Bees have heard every story, every loss, every wedding, and still clock in every morning. Therapy goals, honestly. The beekeeper gestures for you to move on, and you do, leaving the hives undisturbed. The ritual lingers with you as you walk. It's strange how such a small act, speaking softly to insects, can feel grounding. Medieval life didn't separate the emotional from the practical as neatly as we like to imagine. Grief lived alongside chores. Celebration shared space with maintenance. The path ahead slopes gently downward, leading away from voices, rituals, and explanations. The night air grows cooler, brushing against your face like a reminder to slow even more. Bees fade behind you, but their presence remains, stitched into the landscape like an unspoken agreement. You walk on, carrying the idea that sometimes peace comes from telling someone, anyone, what's happening, even if they never reply. The ground levels out again as you walk, and the path widens just enough to suggest that people argue here occasionally. The air feels different, less floral, more neutral, like a place meant for decisions rather than growing things. A low wooden fence runs alongside you, its posts uneven, some newer than others. Repairs have been made. Disagreements, apparently, have happened. This is where hives stop being peaceful and start becoming legal. You arrive at the edge of a small village clearing, moonlight settling gently on rooftops and packed earth. A few people stand nearby, not tense, just alert, the way people get when something mildly inconvenient has occurred. At the center of it all sits a hive, or rather, half a hive. The other half is missing, and everyone is pretending not to stare at the gap. A widely accepted historical fact eases into place. Medieval laws often included specific penalties for stealing or damaging beehives, recognizing their economic and agricultural importance. Bees mattered. Hive theft wasn't treated lightly, but it also wasn't met with dramatic punishment. This is not a hang-you-at-on situation. It's more of a we need to talk situation. An elder steps forward, holding a simple staff that signifies authority, mostly because everyone agrees it does. He examines the hive carefully, nodding slowly. There's no anger here, just methodical assessment. Who owns the land? Who tended the bees? Where was the hive last seen intact? The questions drift through the air calmly, like smoke. Here's a quirky detail that often surprises people. In many regions, punishment for hive theft involved fines paid in honey or wax, rather than physical penalties. Sometimes, the guilty party was required to replace the hive entirely. Apologies were expected. Public acknowledgement mattered. Medieval justice, at least in this corner, leaned toward restoration rather than revenge. You find yourself oddly relieved. The bees, after all, didn't ask to be involved in human disagreements. A light joke flickers through your mind. Imagine explaining to your medieval friends that you're grounded because of unauthorized bee borrowing. The accused, if that's even the right word, stands quietly, eyes downcast, not defiant. He admits he thought the hive was abandoned. Maybe it was, maybe it wasn't. Historians still wonder how often these disputes came down to genuine confusion rather than theft. Bees don't exactly file paperwork when they move. The elder listens, nods, and declares a solution that satisfies no one completely and therefore satisfies everyone enough. Compensation will be paid. The hive will be rebuilt. The matter will end here. No one cheers, no one sulks. The village exhales collectively. You notice how quickly attention drifts away once the decision is made. Someone mentions bread. Someone else yawns. Conflict resolves, and life resumes. Slightly stickier, but intact. As people disperse, you approach the damaged hive. Bees move in and out calmly, uninterested in human systems of blame. They adapt, they always do. The beekeeper kneels to inspect the structure, already planning repairs. Straw can be replaced. Wax can be reshaped. Order returns. An open question lingers. One historians still debate quietly. Did the relative gentleness of hive laws reflect a broader respect for bees? Or was it simply practical economics dressed as fairness? Probably both. Bees were valuable, but they were also fragile partners. Destroying the keeper destroyed the hive. Cooperation made sense. You step away as the beekeeper begins working, the soft rustle of straw and low hum blending into the night. Somewhere behind you, a door closes. Somewhere ahead, the path continues, unbothered by legal precedents. The night air cools again, and your shoulders drop without you noticing. Even disputes here feel slow, thoughtful, resolved before they grow sharp. You carry that calm forward, letting it settle into your breath. Bees hum. Villagers sleep. Laws hold gently. The village slips back into sleep behind you, its low roofs and quiet agreements dissolving into shadow. The path curves gently toward open fields, and the sky begins its slow shift toward the deeper part of night, where stars feel less decorative and more instructional. Your steps fall into an easy rhythm now, matched unconsciously to your breathing. This is the rhythm the bees know best. You walk alongside the beekeeper again, though neither of you speaks. Words feel unnecessary when the landscape explains itself. Fields stretch wide and dark, broken only by hedgerows and the occasional silhouette of a tree that looks like it's been thinking for centuries. Somewhere out there, hives rest, sealed for the night, their work paused until morning light gives permission. A widely accepted historical fact settles in quietly. Medieval beekeeping followed strict seasonal rhythms, with each part of the year dictating specific tasks: spring for swarming and expansion, summer for honey flow, autumn for preparation, and winter for restraint. Beekeepers didn't fight the calendar. They negotiated with it. You picture the year unfolding not as months, but as textures. Spring smells green and impatient. Summer hums loudly and sticks to your fingers. Autumn feels heavier, thoughtful, filled with decisions about how much honey can be taken without risking survival. Winter is mostly waiting. The beekeeper gestures toward a distant line of trees, explaining softly how hives are moved or not moved depending on the season. Some are placed near early blooms, others stay put, trusted to adapt. There's no single method. Medieval manuals disagreed often, which feels comforting in a very human way. Here's a lesser-known detail that feels almost modern. Some medieval beekeepers tracked flowering cycles closely enough to predict yields, adjusting their expectations rather than forcing outcomes. They understood, at least intuitively, that bees don't respond well to pressure. Neither do people. Honestly, a light joke drifts through your mind. Medieval productivity culture was basically try again next spring. As you walk, the air cools further, carrying the faint scent of damp earth. You realize how much of beekeeping is actually about doing nothing at the right time. Knowing when to step back, knowing when to leave the hive alone. This restraint is learned slowly, often through mistakes that sting in more ways than one. The beekeeper admits quietly that the hardest season is late winter. Stores run low. Weather turns unpredictable. You check hives without opening them, listening instead, pressing an ear close to straw walls, hoping to hear life. That sound becomes everything. Historians still wonder how beekeepers balanced faith and observation during these months. How much was prayer? How much was experience? And how often the two blended into something indistinguishable? When a hive survived winter, it felt earned. When it didn't, explanations varied. You stop near a field where frost already glints faintly, even though it's not quite time yet. The beekeeper points out where hives will be wrapped, sheltered from wind, sometimes partially buried for insulation. It's careful work, done slowly, without panic. Bees are given what they need, not what people wish they needed. Another soft joke settles in. Medieval beekeepers invented do not disturb centuries before doors existed. The stars overhead feel steadier now, as if they've committed to staying. The hum you've grown used to isn't audible here, but you sense it anyway. Like a memory your body remembers, even when your ears don't. As you move on, the idea settles gently. The year turns, bees adapt, and humans learn patience whether they want to or not. The path ahead continues, guided not by urgency, but by repetition. Seasons repeat, work repeats, Gotcom returns. Again and again. Your steps slow even more, syncing with the imagined heartbeat of a hive waiting for morning. The field gives way to a narrower track, and the smell in the air shifts almost imperceptibly from earth and frost to something warmer, richer. Wood smoke drifts low, hugging the ground like it's also trying to rest. Ahead, a cluster of homes settles into the night, their windows glowing faintly, not bright enough to interrupt sleep. Just enough to suggest life continuing quietly indoors. This is where honey leaves the hive and enters the kitchen. You step inside one of the homes without ceremony. No one seems surprised. Medieval hospitality runs on the assumption that if you're here, you're tired and probably hungry. A hearth glows gently, embers pulsing like a slow heartbeat. Pots hang overhead, darkened by years of use. The air smells faintly of grain, herbs, and sweetness. A widely accepted historical fact arrives easily here. Before refined sugar became widely available in Europe, honey was the primary sweetener in medieval cooking. It flavored breads, stews, sauces, and drinks. Sweetness wasn't constant or excessive, it was measured, intentional, and appreciated when it appeared. Someone stirs a pot, slowly, adding a small spoonful of honey. Not much, enough to round the edges of the flavor, not enough to announce itself. You realize medieval sweetness isn't about indulgence, it's about balance. Honey softens bitterness, smooths rough grains, and makes simple food feel complete. Here's a lesser-known detail that feels surprisingly cozy. Honey was often mixed with vinegar, herbs, or spices to create early sauces and preserves. Sweet and sour lived happily together. The modern idea of dessert as a separate event hadn't fully arrived yet. Honey belonged everywhere. You're offered a piece of bread, dense and warm, drizzled lightly with honey. You take it carefully. It's sticky in that patient way, clinging to your fingers without rushing. You imagine how rare this moment might feel after a long day of labor. Sweetness as a pause, not a reward. A light joke drifts through your mind. Medieval cheat days were extremely polite. The fire crackles softly. Someone hums, off-key but confident. The beekeeper sits nearby, hands wrapped around a cup of warm drink mead, most likely another honey-based staple. Mead varies wildly in quality. Sometimes it's smooth and fragrant. Sometimes it tastes like regret with ambition. Tonight's seems decent. Historians still wonder how common honey-sweetened foods truly were for ordinary people versus special occasions. Written recipes often reflect wealthier households, but archaeological evidence suggests honey appeared more regularly than we once assumed, just in smaller, quieter ways. You watch as a small jar of honey is sealed carefully and placed on a shelf, labeled only by memory. It will be used sparingly. Nothing here is wasted. Even the sticky remnants on the spoon are scraped thoughtfully back into the jar. Honey earns respect through effort. Outside, the night deepens further, pressing gently against the walls. Inside, the hearth holds steady. The contrast is comforting. Bees, you realize, extend their influence far beyond the hive. Their work reaches tables, flavors, and moments like this, slow, warm, and human. As the meal winds down, conversation fades naturally, not awkwardly. People yawn without apology. Someone stirs the fire one last time before letting it settle. You feel your shoulders drop again. Tension you didn't know you were carrying finally letting go. You step back outside, the sweetness lingering faintly on your tongue. The path waits, quiet and familiar. Honey has done its job, nourishing, calming, and then stepping aside without demanding attention. You move on, slower now, as if the night itself has added weight to your steps. The good kind that pulls you gently toward rest. The warmth of the hearth follows you longer than expected, clinging to your senses even as the air grows cooler again. The path narrows once more, leading toward a cluster of buildings set slightly apart from the village structures that seem to glow from within, their windows casting soft, steady light rather than flickering bursts. This is where beeswax becomes something close to magic. You step inside a long, quiet space where candles line wooden shelves, each one slightly imperfect, each one glowing with the same calm determination. The air smells clean, faintly sweet, faintly warm, nothing sharp or smoky. Your eyes adjust slowly, and you realize how different this light feels. It doesn't shout, it doesn't dance wildly. It simply exists. A widely accepted historical fact settles here with the certainty of flame. Beeswax candles burned cleaner and longer than tallow candles, making them highly prized in medieval churches, workshops, and wealthier homes. They produced less smoke, less odor, and a steadier light. Clean light mattered in ways that were both practical and symbolic. A candle maker moves quietly among the racks, trimming wicks, inspecting wax, making small adjustments that feel almost parental. Each candle is handled as if it has preferences. You get the sense that rushing this process would be considered rude. Here's a lesser-known detail that feels oddly intimate. Beeswax candles were sometimes reused repeatedly, melted down and reshaped when they grew too short. Nothing was wasted. Even spent light could be reborn. You imagine a candle living several lives, illuminating prayers, workbenches, and late-night conversations before returning to liquid form. The candle maker explains that beeswax carries the scent of flowers, but only faintly. It's subtle enough to be calming rather than distracting. This is light meant for focus, reflection, and endurance. It doesn't demand attention, it supports it. A gentle joke floats through your thoughts. Medieval mood lighting was extremely intentional. You watch as a candle is lit and placed carefully on a table. The flame steadies almost immediately, standing upright like it knows it has a job to do. Shadows soften. The room feels smaller, safer, wrapped in quiet glow. You understand why this light was associated with purity and order. It behaves. Historians still wonder how much of beeswax's symbolic importance came from its practical superiority versus the labor required to obtain it. When something takes effort, people tend to assign meaning. Bees worked, beekeepers worked, candle makers worked. The light felt earned. Outside, you glimpse the darker shapes of tallow candles stored separately. They'll be used to, just not here. Beeswax is reserved, rationed, respected. You realize how much medieval life involved deciding what deserved the best materials. Light, it seems, was one of those things. The candle maker extinguishes the flame gently, pinching the wick with practiced fingers. The room dims, but not suddenly. Darkness returns, gradually, politely. You blink, adjusting, carrying the memory of that steady glow with you. As you step back into the night, the contrast feels softer now. You know light exists nearby, waiting when needed. Bees have made it possible. Their quiet labor stretches into the dark, into time itself. You walk on, guided not by brightness, but by the calm knowledge that illumination can be gentle, patient, and deeply reassuring. The candlelight fades behind you, but its after-image lingers, like a warm square pressed gently into memory. The path slopes upward now, subtly, encouraging slower steps and longer pauses. The air feels thinner somehow, not colder, just clearer, as if the night has decided to pay closer attention. You're moving into the realm of questions now, not disputes exactly, not arguments, but the quiet uncertainties medieval people lived with comfortably, ideas that never needed settling to remain useful. Bees, as it turns out, inspired a surprising number of them. You pause near a low stone wall overlooking fields and forest beyond. And the beekeeper joins you again, leaning on the stones like someone reviewing a long day without urgency. He talks, slowly, about how people speak of bees, how they're called livestock in some records, wild creatures in others, and something in between everywhere else. A widely accepted historical fact settles in here. Medieval writers often used bees as moral examples, praising their cooperation, industry, and order. Bees appeared in sermons, manuscripts, and even political metaphors. They were admired not just for what they produced, but for how they lived. And yet, the law never fully decided what bees were. Here's a lesser-known detail that complicates things gently. In some legal texts, beekeepers only owned bees as long as they could physically follow a swarm when it left the hive. If you lost sight of them, ownership could be lost too. Possession depended on movement, effort, and breath. You had to keep up. You imagine medieval villagers sprinting after bees, dignity abandoned, laws flapping wildly behind them. A light joke drifts through your mind. This might be history's least graceful legal process. The beekeeper shrugs when you ask what bees truly are. Property, partners, neighbors, he suggests they're borrowed. Borrowed from the land, from God, from chance. That answer feels intentionally unsatisfying, which somehow makes it perfect. Historians still wonder whether people genuinely believed bees understood human order, or if that belief was simply comforting. Bees seemed to follow rules without being told. They organized themselves without visible authority. In a medieval world full of hierarchy and enforcement, that was intriguing. You lean against the stone wall and watch the fields below, imagining invisible flight paths traced by bees during the day. Even now, with hives closed and wings still, those paths feel present. Memory doesn't require motion. The beekeeper mentions old debates whether bees worked for the good of the hive or followed instinct alone, whether their queen ruled or merely existed as a focal point. These questions were asked quietly, without urgency. Answers weren't required. Curiosity itself was enough. Another gentle joke settles in. Medieval philosophy accidentally invented office politics by watching insects. The night deepens again, wrapping around the stones, the wall, the unanswered questions. You realize that much of medieval beekeeping and medieval life functioned comfortably without clarity. Bees made honey. Laws made space. Beliefs filled in the rest. You push off from the wall and continue walking, carrying these unresolved ideas lightly. They don't weigh you down. They don't demand solutions. They simply exist, like stars whose names you don't need to know to enjoy their light. The path ahead curves downward now, returning you gently toward familiar ground. The hum you've grown accustomed to isn't audible, but it feels closer again, like something waiting patiently for you to arrive. You walk on, content to let some questions stay unanswered, trusting that not everything needs a verdict to be peaceful. The path curves gently downward, smoothing out beneath your feet as if it knows the night is growing heavy. The air cools further, not sharply, just enough to encourage deeper breaths. You smell straw again before you see it. That dry, comforting scent that signals you're returning to the edge of the apiary. Dusk has fully claimed the land now. The hives sit quietly in the half-light, their rounded shapes softened by shadow. No bees fly, no guards hover. Everything is closed, tucked in, content to wait. You slow without thinking, matching the stillness around you, as though moving too quickly here would feel impolite. A widely accepted historical fact settles calmly into place. Bees become far less active after sunset, clustering inside their hives to conserve warmth and energy. Medieval beekeepers knew this well, and most hive work stopped entirely once evening arrived. Night was not for intervention. Night was for trust. You stand beside the beekeeper again, both of you watching without doing anything in particular. He adjusts a stone at the base of one hive, more habit than necessity, then steps back. That's it. No grand closing ritual, just a small act of care before letting things be. Here's a lesser-known detail that feels especially gentle. Some medieval beekeepers believed bees slept, not just rested, and that disturbing a hive at night could upset their dreams. Whether anyone truly believed bees dreamed is still debated. But the behavior it encouraged leaving them alone was undeniably practical. A light joke drifts through your thoughts. Even medieval bees had boundaries. The sky deepens into a velvety blue, stars emerging slowly, like they're checking whether it's safe to come out. The hum you followed all night is gone now, replaced by something quieter, almost like the memory of sound rather than sound itself. Your ears strain for it anyway, out of habit. Historians still wonder how much emotional attachment beekeepers formed with their hives. Records mention losses with surprising tenderness, but rarely explain why. Was it economic anxiety, routine disrupted, or something closer to companionship? The answer, like most things here, likely depends on the person and the season. You notice how calm the beekeeper looks now. The day's responsibilities are done. Whatever will happen next, whether blooms, yields, belongs to tomorrow. There's relief in that. There's also humility. Bees don't respond to worry. You take a few steps back, giving the hives space, letting the night settle fully. Somewhere far off, an owl calls, its sound stretching thin across the fields. Nothing answers it. That's fine. Silence doesn't require a response. The apiary feels smaller now, not diminished, just contained, like a thought neatly put away. You realize how much of medieval life revolved around recognizing when to stop, when effort turned into interference, when care meant absence. You turn away slowly, the hives remaining exactly as they are, stable, quiet, complete. The path ahead is darker, but familiar. Your steps fall softly, careful not to break the calm you're carrying. As you walk, the idea settles gently. Peace isn't something added to the day. It's what's left when everything unnecessary steps aside. The path carries you away from the apiary for the last time. Not abruptly, not with any sense of ending, but with the slow easing out of a long breath. The night feels settled now, complete in a way that doesn't ask for improvement. Your steps are quieter than before, partly because the ground is softer, partly because you've learned the rhythm of this place. You walk alone, but not lonely. The fields stretch wide and dark, their shapes smoothed by moonlight until they feel almost unreal, like a painting someone forgot to finish. Somewhere behind you, hives rest in perfect indifference. Somewhere ahead, morning waits without urgency. You exist comfortably in between. A widely accepted historical fact rests here, simple and grounding. Medieval beekeeping practices changed very slowly over centuries, passed down through observation rather than innovation. Techniques endured not because they were written down perfectly, but because they worked well enough. Stability mattered more than progress. You realize that much of what you've seen tonight survives precisely because it resisted speed. Bees didn't rush. Beekeepers didn't rush. Laws, customs, and rituals all moved at the pace of seasons, not minutes. Even disagreements unfolded slowly, giving everyone time to cool off before speaking. Here's a lesser-known detail that feels like a quiet goodbye. Some medieval families marked generations of beekeepers, not with written records, but by the placement of hives moving them slightly each decade as land changed hands, as children grew, as elders stepped back. The landscape itself remembered who had cared for the bees. You pause once more, looking out over the darkened land, and consider an open question historians still wonder about. Did medieval people feel time differently because their lives were shaped by repetition rather than acceleration? Or did it feel just as fast to them, only quieter? There's no clear answer. Perhaps time always feels fast in hindsight and slow in the living. A final light joke drifts through your thoughts. Medieval people didn't optimize their lives, and somehow everything still got done. Your breathing slows naturally now, matching the stillness around you. The night doesn't demand anything. It doesn't even seem particularly interested in you. And that's comforting. You're allowed to simply exist, to walk, to listen, to eventually stop. The path narrows and then dissolves into open ground. There's nowhere specific to go anymore. You realize you're meant to rest here, metaphorically, if not physically. The journey doesn't need a conclusion. It's done its work. You let the last images settle. Straw hives under stars, honey poured slowly, candles glowing without flicker, bees resting without concern for laws or taxes or questions. Order without noise, sweetness without excess. You take one final step, then another, and then you stop walking entirely, standing quietly in the dark, feeling the calm you've carried all night settle fully into place. Now, you don't need to imagine walking anymore. You can let your body become still, supported wherever you are, breathing slowly and comfortably, the way you do when nothing is expected of you. The images from the night soften, like candlelight dimmed but not extinguished, still there, just gentler now. You might picture the hives again, closed and quiet, wrapped in darkness and patience, each one holding warmth inside. Or maybe you picture the slow pour of honey, how it never rushes, how it trusts gravity to do the work. Let your breath move the same way downward, steady, unforced. The night stretches around you, wide and calm, with no edges you need to worry about. There's nothing left to follow, nothing left to solve. Questions can rest. Thoughts can loosen their grip and drift, one by one, like bees settling in for the night. If your mind wanders, that's fine. It can wander the way paths wander, without urgency, without destination. You are safe here, unobserved, unjudged, allowed to rest exactly as you are. With each breath, your body grows heavier, more comfortable, more at ease. The world doesn't need your attention right now. It knows how to continue on its own. So you can sleep,